It is the year 1206, and the assembly of Mongol chieftains called a Qurultai is being convened. The air is euphoric as fierce nomads of the steppe wait to know the name of their next great leader, their Khan. Soon the ranks of disciplined Mongol soldiers split to make way as one man endowed with immense strength and resilience, blessed with one of the sharpest minds in military history, burning with a fierce ambition, walks through receiving salutations from the jeering crowd. It seems as if all of history were out there waiting to embrace him, his achievements. This fierce warrior was none other than Temujin, who on that historic day in 1206 was undisputedly crowned the great Khan of the Mongols, Genghis Khan. In the coming years, his vast military machine carved out the largest contiguous empire in all of history, covering lands between the Caspian Sea in the west, the Pacific Ocean in the east, the territories of Kevan Rus in the north, to Levant in the Middle East, and Afghanistan in South Asia. It is the year 1221, and Sultan Shamsuddin Iltutmish is ruling over North India from his capital at Mehrauli in Delhi. Though he has made the Gangetic Plains his new home, his ancestral land back in Afghanistan is being trampled underfoot the Mongol armies. Iltutmish can only pray that the merciless Mongols do not set their eyes upon India, for if they did, nothing could stop them from laying waste to this land. It is under these circumstances that Iltutmish receives frantic calls of help and alliance from one unfortunate prince of the Khwarezmis, Jalaluddin Mangburni. The Khwarezmis had faced the Mongol ire in 1219 on being decisively defeated at a battle near Sirdarya. Jalaluddin, the son of Khwarezmi Shah, had somehow managed to escape from the battlefield, prompting the Mongols to give him a chase. He succeeded in reuniting a ragtag army of local tribesmen and fleeting soldiers in Ghazni and was buying time by repelling smaller Mongol forces. In pursuit of Jalal, the Mongols surged the Khyber Pass and were looking upon the vast riches of the Indian subcontinent where Jalal had hoped to seek an alliance with Iltutmish. Now Jalal really thought that Iltutmish would send out his armies to help him. He was a fellow Muslim. In fact, the Caliph had asked Iltutmish to help Jalal against the Mongols, the infidels. But there was enough reason for Iltutmish to not get the Delhi Sultanate between Genghis Khan's ambitious revenge against the Khwarezmi Shahs. The first reason is, of course, that Genghis Khan is Genghis Khan and no one would like to pick a fight with him. Secondly, the Ghurids and the Khwarezmis weren't on good terms since the past. In fact, the Khwarezmis were contemplating capturing Multan and Punjab from the Sultanate to use it as a base to fight the Mongols. Thirdly, Iltutmish's empire was quite young and on shaky grounds, with rebellions and wars with other Indian rulers. Surely he did want to avoid the Mongol threat. In reaction to Iltutmish's denial, Jalal organized raids into Punjab, Multan, Sindh, and Gujarat. As for the Indians, they were saved from being massacred by the Mongol forces thanks to Iltutmish's strong decision. One fine morning in September 1221, Jalal's small force was caught in a surprise attack on the banks of the Indus River. Jalal managed to flee and to go west with some of his generals, but he was finally put to death by the chasing Mongols. Some scholars suggest that Genghis Khan was contemplating returning back to China via India. He wanted to run through the Gangetic Plains and find a way into China through the Himalayas in the northeast. It was amazingly lucky for the Delhi Sultanate that Genghis Khan did not put his plans into action. Decades later, it is Ghiyasuddin Balban who must deal with the Mongol menace. Balban is an interesting figure as he is quite calculative about his image and he works out a very centralized scheme of administration. This is also the time when many refugees from West and Central Asia are being absorbed in the Sultanate to expand Balban's power base. We know that by 1258, 25 Shahzadas of Iraq, Khorasan, and other places with their retinues had sought refuge under Balban. Almost 15 of the unfortunate sovereigns from Turkestan, Khorasan, Iraq, Azerbaijan, Iran, and modern Turkey have also taken refuge there. With this power base, Balban was the man who was going to deal with the Mongol threat. Of course, Genghis Khan was dead by now, but his successors were no less ferocious than him. Balban combines his military and diplomatic genius to defend the Sultanate. One great example of Balban's ability to counter the Mongols was when he was still the regent of Nasiruddin Muhammad. In 1246, the Mongols had raided Multan and Lahore and demanded heavy extortions. Interestingly, many Multanese merchants gave loans to the Sultanate rulers. Some supported and traded with the Mongols. It was not that the people of India just sat back and accepted the fate of being ruled by different people. They actively participated in supporting power blocs. Coming back to Balban, he took an important step in heavily fortifying the northwestern frontier and Delhi. Another very bold move that he made was when Hulagu Khan's ambassadors visited Delhi to sign a treaty. For Balban, this was a trip that could either prove utterly disastrous or magnificently successful. Hulagu Khan was embroiled in Mongol geopolitics and needed to consolidate some of his power in West Asia. That prompted him to contemplate temporary peace with the Delhi sultans. But Balban was wise enough to realize Hulagu's ambition to invade India in the future. Now, any ambassador who would come to Delhi would obviously make note of the fortifications on the way, and Hulagu could plan his invasions accordingly. To douse away any ambition of the Mongols to invade India, Balban organized a brilliant diplomatic exercise, something which could be compared to a deterrence in modern war parlance. He organized a hunt in 1259 to mimic the hunting practice of the Mongols called anerge. Anerge is not an ordinary hunting exercise but a skilled and disciplined hunting expedition carried out by the Mongol armies. An entire unit of Mongol cavalry would systematically coordinate and encircle an entire area pre-decided for the hunt. The circle would systematically contract, confining all the animals in a single area before killing them with arrows. The Nerge employed skilled manpower in terms of cavalry archers, drummers, and commanders. The very fact that Balban was able to organize such a hunt using Sultanate armies put his military ability at par with Hulagu's. Besides this, Balban organized a huge military inspection of 200,000 infantrymen and 50,000 cavalrymen in the presence of Sultan Nasiruddin and in the presence of the ambassadors. Of course, most of these men were either called back from the provinces for the day or were temporarily raised from the civilians in and around Delhi. But the point is that Balban succeeded in projecting that the Sultanate was a strong entity not to be meddled with, and Hulagu was quick to buy this.
The 1260s have saw the consolidation of power in Central Asia in the hands of Chagatai Khanate, a Mongol faction descending from Genghis Khan's third son Chagatai. Dua Khan, sitting in Afghanistan, is looking for a more permanent expansion into the subcontinent. Delhi is under the yoke of Khiljis, whose first two rulers, Jalaluddin and Alauddin, will repel at least 7 attempts of Mongols to run over India. The close of 13th century saw the rise of an extraordinary ruler in Indian history. He who is known for his blood-curdling conquest and astute strategy. He whose ambitions expanded the Sultanate frontier as far as Tamil Nadu in the south. He, Sultan Alauddin Khilji Sikandar Sani. Alauddin sent his generals Zafar Khan and Ulugh Khan to tackle early invasions in Punjab. At the Battle of Sivistan, Alauddin's army captured some 20,000 Mongol soldiers. Many were killed by trampling under the foot of elephants. Another important battle was the Battle of Kili, where Alauddin personally led his armies. This battle was the ultimate test for the Sultanate cavalry, who would have to beat the Mongols using Mongol tactics of swiftly encircling the enemy and inflicting damage using the famous Parthian shot. A shot in archery where a soldier must turn 180 degrees while on moving horse and shoot arrows precisely at enemy soldiers. Alauddin might have won the day had one of his generals, Zafar Khan, not plunged into the battle earlier than required. Alauddin had to retreat and come back strong next time. The years 1302 and 3 brought the Sultanate almost close to extinction when the Mongols launched a siege on Delhi. Alauddin, maintaining his cool in these times of extreme turbulence, designed a spectacular offense and defense. He is able to hold the fort long enough to prolong the siege and severely strain Mongol supply lines. Secondly, he uses surprise attacks from labyrinths within the fort, inflicting heavy damage on the Mongols. The Mongols finally retreated and Delhi was victorious. Now, let us move on to discuss some factors that prevented the Mongols from conquering India. Firstly, fortification provided an upper hand to the defending Sultanate armies. Mongol warfare is not suitable for prolonged sieges. They essentially rely on lightning attack tactics. Their warfare is suited more to open battlegrounds where they can surround the enemy swiftly and shower it down with arrows. Each Mongol soldier travels with 4 to 5 horses and 1 or 2 camels, and this means that there is a huge requirement of fodder. This fodder may be openly available in grasslands, but the fact that Indian plains were so cultivated was what became a huge disadvantage. Laying sieges to Indian forts would severely strain their supply lines, forcing them with an early retreat. In these respects, all that the Sultanate armies had to do was to buy enough time and hold on to their frontier forts for as long as possible. Next, there was a lot of internal factionalism among the Mongols after Genghis Khan's death. Thus, vital resources were diverted to fighting internal wars than concentrating on external expansion. This factor also exposed the geopolitical limits to which Mongols could expand their control. The vast climatic variation in the Indian subcontinent compared to Central Asia was unsuitable to Mongol conquest, especially at the time when they needed to pay enough attention on maintaining their hold over China. Lastly, the timely leadership provided by Delhi Sultans in the terms of military organization and diplomacy saved the day. Now, there were Mongol incursions into Kashmir and raids in Gujarat and Sindh during various points in the Sultanate era. Later on, Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq opened diplomatic channels with the Mongols in China, ushering into an era of relative peace until Timur, a Turk associated with Mongols through matrimonial ties, swept over the Gangetic plains, massacring the people of Delhi. It was finally Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, who was able to carve out an empire in India. But these are stories for another day.